Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So, hello everyone, welcome to Basics Discussion Circle Meditation. My name is Travis, I facilitate this group. So So if you'd like, feel free to say hello in the live chat here. And if you have any requests for a particular topic, you can leave that there as well. I have a vague idea of what I'd like to talk about tonight, but I'm always open to if anyone has any burning need to ask a particular question or hear about a particular topic, I'd always rather prioritize that. So I hope you're all doing well tonight. I think, So, hello, Roberto. Hope you're doing well. I think tonight, maybe we'll do some elements meditation. It's one I'm a particular fan of. So we can play with that a little bit. Those of you who've done it with me here in person know that generally I do it if it's particularly hot or cold in the temple. Tonight it's actually pretty neutral, but I feel like doing it anyway. The elements meditation is a way of getting in touch with more facets of our awareness of the body and of the breath. So we'll basically be like, we'll work with balancing the temperature in the body and then the sense of solidity versus a sense of movement or lightness. I'll often kind of refer to elements meditation as a Goldilocks meditation because we're trying to find that comfortable middle ground. We're trying to adjust our experience of the sensation in the present moment. If we focus when we focus just on the breath, that tends to leave out a lot of dimensions of physical sensation, right? With the breath, we pretty much have a sensation of movement and then a sensation of kind of relaxing of tension. But there's also pockets of warmth and coldness throughout the body. There's the solidity of the bones, the movement of the blood. There's a lot that we don't focus on that the elements meditation is kind of geared towards becoming aware of. So, hello, Rachel. Hello, Sherry. Hello, Darcy. Hello, Gabriel. It's nice to see y'all tonight, or as well sit with y'all virtually tonight. So I think with that, we'll go right into the meditation. Just a few things I'd like to kind of get out of the way at the beginning is with elements meditation, it's nothing esoteric. It's nothing like we're not like bending the elements like it's the avatar or something like that. We're working more on the elements are used as a label for sensations throughout the body, which I've kind of already touched on, but I just want to make that really clear. We're not like shamanically channeling energy or anything like that. We're focusing on, you're welcome to if you want to, but we're focusing on these sensations throughout the body. And the elements are kind of a simple vocabulary for labeling these sensations, right? So you got fire, which is a sense of heat or warmth in the body. Water, which is a sense of coolness or the moving of liquid throughout the body. Earth, which is a sense of solidity, where you may be, where your body may be in contact with the floor or the seat. The sensation of the bones. things of that nature. And then air is this kind of as I mentioned earlier with the breath, this movement through the body, this sense of lightness. So we're going to be kind of going through these bit by bit and just trying to find a comfortable equilibrium between hot and cold, heavy and light. That's pretty much it. There's two additional elements of space, which I prefer to do as a separate meditation. Maybe we'll do next week. And then consciousness. And consciousness is just that which is aware of this process, right? So, ooh. So I think with that, we'll get started. Um, Rachel asked if the elements can be applied to emotions. I would say, so they're not, the way they're traditionally taught, they're not like directly applied to emotions. But as I always mention, emotions give rise to, or well, depending on how you look at it, they either give rise to sensations in the body, or sensations in the body give rise to emotions. So, because the elements are, in the simplest sense, just sensations throughout the body that we're able to label and kind of separate for the sake of finding some balance, they definitely can be applied to the emotions in terms of noticing what kind of elements or what kind of sensations are kind of connected to the emotions that may be arising in the mind. Like anger might have a sensation of warmth and heaviness, or warmth and lightness if it's an adrenaline rush type of anger, right? So we can notice how different emotions that arise, what their physical components are. And when we can learn how to kind of get balance, for example, with like anger, if it causes a lot of heat in the body, if we can learn to use the water element to cool the body back down, it also cools the mind off a little bit. So yes, they can go hand in hand. So with that, we will get started. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Noticing if deep breathing feels good for the body. If it does, you can keep on breathing in this way. If it doesn't, switch things up. Maybe even deeper still or more shallow, faster or slower. In long, out short. In short, out long. Just playing around for a few minutes, seeing what feels best for the body in this moment. If you want, you can even pose the question in the mind as to what kind of breathing would feel the most calming or the most energizing, whatever you're needing in the moment. And then just watch how the breath responds. Not forcing the breath, but gently guiding it, allowing it to flow. With the breath settling into its own rhythm, we can begin to notice if there's any tension around the breathing process. If there's a sense of squeezing or pushing, and see if we can consciously relax that tension, allowing the breath to flow in and out freely. Wind is the element of freedom, so we want to do our best to give the breath that freedom. Relaxing tension around the nose and the eyes and the forehead. The neck and the shoulders, as well as any tension around the lungs and the chest. And expanding this element of air throughout the body, this sensation of lightness, movement. Remembering that the body breathes not only with the nose and the mouth, but also through the surface of the skin, through the pores. If you're feeling drowsy, you can imagine the breath flowing up through the body in waves with each in and out breath, from the tips of the toes all the way up to the crown of the head. If you're restless or anxious, you can do the opposite, imagining the breath flowing from the crown of the head down to the tips of the toes in waves. And as you play with these upwards currents and these downward currents, when you feel like you've found a balance between this sort of tiredness and this anxiousness, when you feel you found equilibrium, you can focus on the sensation of expansion and contraction, as if the entire body was a lung, expanding with the in breath contracting with the out breath. With the element of air balanced throughout the body, can move on to the element of earth. In other words, the sense of solidity throughout the body. Earth is the element of stability, of grounding. So we can allow our awareness of the breath to just kind of naturally fade into the background and shift our awareness to where our body meets our seat or the floor. Almost as if we're allowing our awareness to kind of flow down from where we're seated to expand past the feet, down into the ground, firmly rooting us in place. So we're not really making a distinction between us and our seat and us and the floor beneath us. Some people even like to imagine roots growing down. And from this firm foundation, you can begin tracing your awareness up through the structure of the body, up through the bones, up through what's holding us upright. Slowly tuning in to this solidity throughout the body for the next few minutes. The entire body grounded in the solidity of the earth element, the stability of earth. And here, just like we did earlier, with air, we can find a balance within this element, within the sense of solidity. Noticing if the solidity makes us feel claustrophobic or drowsy, and seeing if we can find a balance between the solidity of earth and the lightness of air. It's kind of generally focusing on these two different sensations and allowing them to find balance within each other. Just allowing. Grounded by earth, energized by air. With air and earth at equilibrium, we can move on to elements of water and fire. Setting aside earth and air for the time being and tuning in to the varied temperatures throughout the body. Noticing the parts that are particularly cooler than the rest of the body, and the parts that are particularly warmer than the rest of the body. And seeing if, just like how we move breath and awareness throughout the body, seeing if we can move these sensations of warmth and coolness throughout the body. Sending warmth to parts of the body that are cool, and sending the coolness to the parts of the body that are warm. If you want, you can even use the breath as a tool here. Imagining the breath as fire or sunlight, breathing into the parts of the body that are cold, or as cooling water or snowy winds, breathing into the parts of the body that are warm. Seeing if we can balance this temperature out to a relatively even temperature throughout the body, a comfortable temperature. And with the temperature in the body somewhat balanced and regulated, we can once again take 3 deep breaths slowly. Slowly opening the eyes and stretching if needed, never in a rush to leave the meditation. So, as always, I'm curious to hear how that experience of meditation was for you. Whether you found it enjoyable or difficult, straightforward or confusing, or whatever you may be sitting with now. Or if you have any questions specifically about this meditation, this style of meditation. So tonight, the meditation was a bit longer than I would typically do with elements meditation. So I gave a bit more instruction with regards to finding that balance with each element than I normally do. As I mentioned in the beginning, the kind of the whole or one of the major points of elements meditation. There's kind of 2 major points, and I only really focus on one of them. One of the major points of elements meditation is using these elements to find a sense of balance, a sense of equilibrium. So regardless of conditions outside the body, we can manage a stable awareness within the body, whether it's regardless of whether it's too hot or too cold, or uh, we feel lightheaded or we feel sluggish or whatever it may be. We can use these elements to find a sense of balance between these extremes of hot and cold, sluggish and anxious, and things like that. So the emphasis on elements meditation really is about finding that balance, that Not too hot, not too cold, not too hard, not too soft, Goldilocks style. Um, so maybe another time I'll lead an elements meditation more centered around um, being aware of any emotions that arise in the mind, and then being able to kind of deconstruct the physical sensation of those emotions out into the elements, if that sounds interesting to y'all. The main reason the main kind of purpose behind the meditations that I choose here, that I lead y'all through, is like all different styles of meditations are intended as a tool for specific purposes, and kind of or for a variety of purposes in some cases. What I'm trying to do with this class is, in order to use a tool, you have to have the tool first. You have to have the tool built first, right? So with these styles of meditation, they're less, they tend to be less geared towards the objective of that style of meditation, and more geared towards developing the tools required to do that type of meditation. I'm not sure if that makes sense. But as I mentioned tonight, I was able to, because I felt comfortable leading a bit of a longer meditation, because anyone that's that miserable by a long meditation can click away. It's a little harder when you're here in person and you feel obligated to stay, even if the meditation's a bit long for you. So we were able to focus on kind of finding that equilibrium within each element. The only other step that would be added on to this, that I just didn't want to make you guys do a full 45-minute meditation, uh, would be to continue on to the element of space, and allowing all four of these elements that we went through to kind of find equilibrium with each other. Not just the pairs of earth and air and fire and water, but allowing all the elements to kind of interact, kind of creating this three-dimensional full-bodied awareness instead of the one-dimensional awareness of just breath. So we're aware of movement, of the solidity, of the hot, the cold, the liquidity. We didn't even cover the liquidity, but that is part of the water element. The sensation of the heart pumping and the blood pumping through the body. Ooh. Roberto shared, thanks, Travis. I was restless from the energy I brought into my meditation. Somewhere towards the end, I realized that my body was much less tense, even though I didn't perceive that my mind had calmed. Awesome. I mean, I'm sorry the mind didn't calm, but it's excellent that the body did. Um, these elements, and for the most part, most of what I lead in this class tends to be body work type of stuff. So it totally makes sense that the body would calm down into response to it well before the mind does. Especially considering we didn't move on to space and consciousness, which tend to be more of a direct mental aspect to the meditation. Sherry shared, I found it easier to balance air and earth than fire and water. As soon as I looked for cool spots in my body, everything started to feel cold. The power of suggestion. So that's definitely common. It's something that I'll struggle with too, especially if it's particularly cold. What I would suggest, which, and I always say this during the meditation, I can't give all of the suggestions that I would like, because I'd be talking the whole time and then there's no point to meditating, right? So what I would suggest is, when you're working with fire and water, um, if you have a tendency for the whole body to feel cold and coldness is unpleasant to you, I would just work with fire. I would just focus on only the warm spots and allowing the warm spots to expand. And I even use the breath, kind of breathing into the warm spots, like stoking a fire. If you if you've ever built a fire before, you know that like you get the fire kind of started in an embery state and you'll blow on it to increase the flames. I kind of use that same idea, that same image in mind to breathe into the heat to allow the heat to spread. Another really fun little exercise. Um, this came from, this was in like a college, some college's study of the mind or something like that. But I found it really useful. I played around with it for a while. It was about kind of the mind and sensation transference. So one of the tests that they did was they had a little cup with relatively hot water. Disclaimer, not so hot that you burn yourself or anything like that, but with relatively warm water. And then they had a little cup with ice water. And the experiment or the exercise, because I see it as an exercise, um, was you would put either the hand or you would put one finger in each cup. And one finger would be in relatively hot water, and the other finger would be in cool or icy water. And you would basically, in your mind, imagine the fingers switching places or the cups switching places, but it's easier with the fingers. Imagining the fingers switching places or the sensation of the finger switching places. And starting from that kind of that small section of the body instead of trying to do it with the entire body, and working on that transference of sensation can be really beneficial. The out of these, in my opinion, the most practical of these elements is that balance between water and fire. Because oftentimes, um, when we're meditating, if it's particularly hot or particularly cold, uh, just based off of like survival instincts or something like that, the the mind will default into focusing on the uncomfortable hot or the uncomfortable coldness, right? So it can be hard when the weather is extreme, it's not, relatively, to focus on the breath and focus on maintain this awareness because our mind keeps getting pulled to either the hotness or the coolness. And so that's why this type of meditation is really useful, or rather, as a tool to use within any meditation, being able to mentally balance out the temperature in the body, regardless of the atmosphere around us, is really helpful. Because when we have that, when the mind's constantly distracted by the heat, we can kind of say, okay, well, since the mind naturally keeps going there, let's make that the object of the meditation. Instead of trying to fight against it or wrestle against it, let's make temperature the object of the meditation. So there's all this warmth in the body. It's uncomfortable. Can I find parts of the body that feel less warm? Are there parts of the body that maybe even feel cool? Can I expand that? And vice versa with cold. Oh, it's so cold, this is uncomfortable. There's got to be some part of the body that's warm, even if it's deep within the body that's warm. Can I find that warmth? Can I spread it? So it takes advantage of the mind's natural tendency to hyper focus on our environment around us and gives it a purpose or a direction. Hope that makes sense. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share or question? We have time for like one or two more. Not what I wanted, but just one thing that I thought of talking about tonight. I don't really have a preference on what I end up talking about. But one thing that I was kicking around in my head was, as I talk a lot about playing with perception and things like that. And I was thinking, there's something that I'll often say when someone will ask a question, something along the lines of, I have all these bad thoughts in my head. What does that mean? Does it mean I'm a bad person or something like that? And my response is pretty much always the same. It's just thoughts are just thoughts. We may read too much into them, but thoughts are just thoughts. Just because you have bad thoughts doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. Just because you have good thoughts doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person. You're simply a person who's having thoughts. And then we create all these stories around why we're having these thoughts and all this stuff. What's interesting to me, a perspective that's helpful when playing with these perceptions, right, is that we are not our thoughts. Predominantly, if we are anything, we're our actions. Our thoughts are basically just archaeological or historical record of our life, of the things that have happened to us, the stimuli that we've experienced, things like that. That's what kind of forms what kind of thoughts we have, right? And to get down on ourselves because we're having particular thoughts, or to even worse, identify with the thoughts, identify the thoughts as ours instead of the thoughts, because in reality, what the thoughts are basically momentum from the past that's continuing to play itself out for the most part, other than what we're like when we're directly trying to figure something out. That's our thoughts in the moment. Most of the thoughts that come up are literally just, they just still have momentum from, you know, yesterday, a week ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that momentum's propelled them into the moment and they're arising. But just because we have these thoughts arise, it doesn't mean that we're not the sum total of the content of our thoughts. Our thoughts are just kind of things that arise on their own. They're not us. They're something that happens. They're a phenomena of the mind, but we're not our thoughts. So if we're struggling with bad thoughts, anger, resentment, whatever it may be, it doesn't mean that we're a bad person. And it doesn't mean that we're not deserving of anything or anything like that. Those are all just storylines. It simply means that things have happened in our life that gave rise to thoughts that now in this moment we find unpleasant. There's not really a way of judgment of character, judging our own character skillfully based on these thoughts that arise. If we're going to judge our own character in anything, we can judge it on the actions that we take, the good that we try to do now that we're aware, now that we're learning, now that we're trying to improve. So even though we have all of these thoughts come up, all this momentum from the past, it's not us. It's just a historical record of the life that we've lived up until that point. Things that we've been told one time and we thought they were BS when we heard them the first time, but some part of the mind latched onto them and continued on. Things that we heard and agreed with years ago, and now we look back and realize that it was foolish to agree with it. But just because those thoughts, that momentum arises in the present moment, it doesn't have any, it has an impact on us, of course, but it doesn't have it's not a reflection of who we are. It may in some senses be a reflection of who we were, but even a good portion of it's literally just a reflection of things that we have heard, whether we agreed with them or not. They come up into the mind as if they're true, because the deeper levels of the mind don't know any better. They just latch on to anything that comes up, anything that's shiny or different or anything. So that's all I wanted to share tonight. I think we're a little over time, so I'll end there. So if comfortable, please join palms for a dedication of merit. May any merit gained from tonight's meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions, without limit or exception, be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upeka sahanga teya chetasa chaturi bharatva viharati Samamudaro bhavena, Sabadamaro bhavena, Sabba sangharo bhavena, Sote hantu nirantaram. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'll see y'all next week.